What's up YouTube, and welcome to episode 110 of the Chaos Daily. Bit of a special episode today because I just watched UncleJessy's video on him trying to figure out how to do IPA recycling. This is a problem I've been working on as well. As you can see, I go through a lot of IPA. This is 5 liters, there's another 5 liters. If you really want to know how much IPA I go through, I buy it in bulk. This is 20 liters of 100%, well, 99%, well it says 100%, but it's probably 99% IPA. Yeah, I use a lot of IPA, and this is nearly $100, so recycling it is a serious business. So, let me go over some of the stuff that I've been working on to solve this problem, because it's a big one, and there are a lot of people out there resin printing. I get asked about recycling IPA all the time on the Discords that I hang out on. This is a big thing that we need to work out, and I think I'm close to a solution, as well as I've just started discussions with the guys at Siraya with their chemists about potentially a new product that could help in this problem. But yeah, more on that later. So let me go over what I do to recycle my IPA. All right, first off, I just want to apologize for the noise. The printer is going at the moment. It's a 21-hour print, so yeah, I can't do printing or recording separately, so I do apologize. But anyway, so first up, how do you know when it's time to recycle your IPA? I think this is one of the issues you're facing, Jesse, is that you're letting it go too long. 3 weeks, 4 weeks is way too long, it's way too muddy. Usually you want to try and catch it if you're doing regular printing like I do every day. Probably after a week and a half, 2 weeks. A good way to tell is grab yourself one of these UV torch like flashlight. I just take one of these and I turn it on and stick it to the side of the container. I give it a few seconds, and when you stop, you'll see there's a white dot. So after a few seconds, if you see that white dot, it usually means it's almost time to start recycling your IPA. This has probably got another week to go. I just recently did it. Like I said, I'm in development of this process. But let's go over some of the tools that I use to do this. So first off, to filter paper towels. This is honestly the best solution I've come up with. I've used coffee filters, I've used other filters. Paper towels is what works best for me. And the best way that I do it is I take the IPA, I usually put it in the smaller jugs, or I use this large jug when I'm doing like the full batch where I'm recycling the whole lot of it. I'll put it in one of these containers, and then it goes into my UV curing chamber. Now, I don't leave it in there for very long. What happens is, now this is specifically for 100% or 99% IPA. I think 70% IPA is causing that gelatin reaction that you're seeing, where it's sort of becoming, it's curing all the way through. When you do it with 100%, it'll be like this. It just creates a thin skin on the outside. So let me just cure some up and I'll show you what the result is. Right, so while that's in the curing chamber, just curing up, it only takes about 15-20 minutes. I don't leave it in there for very long. I use this tub that I've also got, these big tubs. I picked them up from Kmart. It's like just a basic home appliance store. Like you get all sorts of tubs and whiteware and, you know, just stuff. So what I've got this mesh basket thing from an Easter something or another. I've just placed this in here and it just sits in there nicely. Any kind of mesh basket or even a fine wire mesh sieve, these work as well. Now the trick here when you're doing the filtering is that the resin that is cured is going to very quickly clog up the filter material. So what I do is I layer a couple of layers in here so that when I pour the IPA in here in batches, the first layer gets clogged up. And once that's filtered off, I just peel that layer out, squeeze it off, and chuck it, and then pour the next batch in. And that way I can just continuously filter the whole lot out. Okay, it's been in there for about 10 minutes now, so let's take it out and I can show you what we're looking for. This isn't quite ready yet, but what you can see is, I've got these silicone spatulas to help with the process, is that the resin cures just around the outside. You can see that sort of film that forms. What I do is I just push this film down off of the walls of the container, and it will all just settle down to the bottom. And I just put it back in there. And I repeat this stage a few times to try and cure out as much of the resin in here as possible without it curing all the way through and becoming a gelatin mess. Left it in there for a good 15 minutes. Now you can see there, it's sort of cured in the top there. It's made a nice thin film. And if I cut it, you can see on the inside, there's just liquid all the way through. So it's only created this film around the outside. Sort of like poached eggs. It's very much like poached eggs. Right, so the next step is filtering. Normally, I would run this a few more times through there until the liquid starts looking more and more clear. But just for the sake of this video, it's just a demonstration. I'm going to filter it now. All right, so what I've done is I've given it a little bit of time for all this cured resin to just settle out a bit. And then you just carefully pour off the liquid to start with. and let that drain out first. If you pour it all in at once, then that cured resin that's sitting in the bottom will clog up your filters. And then you have to pull out the filter and then use another layer. So I just leave it there, and I leave that in the container for the time being until this has had time to filter through. And then I just tip the rest of that out. Right, so once you've tipped out the last of it in there, you can see that this cured membrane, it's very much like poached eggs. What I do to try and help the filtering process and try and get as much of the IPA out of this, so what I do is I just use this silicone spatula and I chop up this membrane so that there's lots of places for all of the IPA to seep and leak through and get through to the filter. And if the filtering's taking too long and you want to reduce the number of layers of kitchen towel that you want to end up using, you can sort of scrape it and it moves a lot of that stuff that's getting stuck to the filter paper away to allow more IPA through. And then you just let this drain for a while. This process takes a while, but when you're dealing with this much IPA, you really just have to bite the bullet and, you know, go through the process to try and recover as much of your IPA as possible. Alright guys, so it's been filtering for a bit longer. Normally I leave this to go until it doesn't look wet anymore. This actually starts to end up looking a bit like dry and chalky. You can see it in a couple places when I move it around that it starts to look like that. Just breaking it up some more so that the IPA can seep through it and get to the filter material. But just for the sake of this video, I'm just going to squeeze this out and show you what my next step is normally. So these dishwashing gloves, these are very useful. I keep a number of packs of these and I can reuse them, and then when they get too sticky, I just chuck them out and get a fresh pack out. So we just grab the top layer, just carefully. We sort of just want to pinch all the corners of the paper together, just to trap everything in, make sort of like a tea bag, and then you just gently squeeze it, not too hard or you will rupture the paper and it will break free. You just gently squeeze it. You can see there you're getting quite a lot of it out, and just sort of move it around just to circulate the IPA that's trapped in the congealed mess to the filter material so that you can squeeze more of it out. When it starts to feel like there's not much IPA coming out, give it a massage, squeeze it again, and more will come out again. And there, I squeezed too hard and I burst it. But that's all right. So let me show you the results of just this filter. Normally I run it through the UV curing chamber a number of times just to try and cure off as much of the resin out of the solution as possible. But just for the sake of this, I'm going to show you what the results are. All right, so side by side comparison. Here's the IPA we started with. You can see it's kind of a lot murkier, and if we do our UV flashlight trick, you see it quite quickly creates a little white dot. Now we do the same trick with this, that dot is a lot less noticeable. It's a lot more translucent. I'll count it out at the same time. Let's try it again. That's quite a hard white dot. And that's a lot. Here, let me get the camera and show you. So here's the dirty IPA. And that is the cleaned IPA. It's a little hard to see, but this dot is a lot less solid than that dot. But you can just see from the color as well, this looks a lot murkier and this looks a lot cleaner. Like I said, I normally run this process through the UV chamber a number of times before filtering. I'm working with Siraya, I'm in discussion with Siraya Tech to develop a chemical that acts just like a regular epoxy. In normal epoxies or two-part resins, you have the epoxy and you have a hardener. And the idea that I've got is there a chemical that you can add to your IPA when it's like this that will automatically go through and start the curing process rather than using the UV light to activate the photoinitiators that then start the polymerization process. So using an additional chemical that will separate the resin out of the IPA solution, and then you can filter it off rather than have to use going through the UV chamber multiple times and, you know, scraping down the sides and that. That's the plan that I've got at the moment, and I'm working with them to try and find a solution that does that. So there you go. Hopefully that helped you out, UncleJessy, and a few other people that watch the video. I'm still working on this process, trying to find better solutions to some of the problems I face. For instance, using the multiple layers of kitchen paper to help the filtering process, running it through the UV chamber in shorter periods but multiple times, scraping down the sides to get that resin to fall to the bottom and settle to help separate out the IPA from the resin. These are all the very time-consuming processes. When I go through and recycle an entire batch, when I go through and recycle the entire 5 liters, it's an entire day's job. It takes me all day, but it's not like I'm here the whole time doing it. I set something up to filter or put it in the UV curing chamber for 20 minutes, go off, go do something, come back, take it out, scrape it down, put it back, do that multiple times. Filtering process, yeah, you pour some in there, you go away for half an hour to an hour, you come back, you pour some more in, or you change the paper. It does take all day, and I am working on ways to try and cut down on that effort that you have to put in by working with Siraya Tech to try and make this chemical or come up with a chemical solution to help aid in this recycling process. So yeah, as you can see, recycling IPA is definitely possible. For me, it's an absolute must. I go through so much, I have to use so much IPA for the very large prints that I do. So hopefully this helps a few people. Make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe, and as always, I've been Chaos. And until next time, expect the unexpected, and I'll see you guys later.
And a special thank you to all my patrons that help support the channel. If you would also like to support the channel, there's a link in the description.